Thank you very much for staying tuned to Development Focus with DJ Ojo on ITV this 20th day of October 2021. Our next discussion is on a very interesting topic. I don't know how much of poetry you know or how many poems you have memorized and you can recite, but I recall that many of us, when even we were in junior schools, we are in primary schools, secondary schools, we are made to memorize poems, and all these Twinkle Twinkle Little Stars, Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Those are nursery rhymes and poems that many of us grew on. And I have with me a poet laureate, somebody who has won several awards and accolades across the globe in poetry. Is a social inclusion expert, a development consultant, and a satirist, and he is Olumide Olaniyan. You're welcome on the show.
Thank you very so much, Jide Ojo.
Yeah, so tell us about yourself. Why did you show interest in poetry? What leads you into poetry? And just tell us a bit more about who Olumide Olaniyan is.
Thanks so much, Jide Ojo. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. Poetry, as you mentioned, it's a tool of engagement. For a lot of people, poetry means different things. Several people, for instance, look at poetry mainly from the issue of literature, something that you use in terms of looking at how to connect words, in terms of rhyming, meters, in terms of communicating. But in recent times, it's so obvious that you can actually use poetry in terms of engagement. You can use it for quite a number of issues, in terms of dialoguing, in terms of communicating, in terms of restructuring the society.
So it's a tool of social engineering.
Exactly.
So, but I know you study political science. You didn't do arts, as such. So how come? What attracted you into poetry and poetry writing?
Just as I was saying, poetry is not something that is just, you cannot look at it from what some people have called singularity of literature. It's not something that you can limit to the work of literature. Poetry can be used in almost every field of life to engage, to restructure, to correct anomalies that you may have in any society. So as you mentioned, I study political science and I also study gender and peace building. So for me, I've seen that poetry is one tool that you can use to engage with the public in terms of bringing the public to have better understanding of these issues and for them to also participate more. Of course, quite a number of persons believe that poetry is something that is a bit technical or difficult to...
I was coming to that. People believe that poetry is very esoteric. It's a language of, it's language very technical. There is, you need to have a dictionary by your side for you to understand poetry. Is that so?
That is not very true. Of course, in the pre-colonial era, there's quite a number of poets, for instance, that it depends on the nature of your own writing. For me, as a political poet, for instance, if I can describe myself as that, it depends on what you want to use poetry for. A lot of persons that are environmentalists, for instance, use poetry. If you look at Nimobasi, for instance, he has been using poetry for centuries to discuss the issue of environmental issue in the Niger Delta. For me also, I've used poetry in terms of using it in form of satire, in form of parody, in form of irony to engage the political system in Nigeria, to discuss the issue of accountability, to discuss the issue of equality, to discuss the issue of involvement, inclusion, and participation of everybody in the decision that affects them. So poetry has not been limited. You cannot limit poetry to maybe the esoteric nature of it, looking at maybe just writing discussing and limiting it to that level.
There are different genres of writing.
Exactly.
We have prose, We have poetry, we have drama,
Yes.
we have which other
Those
one?
are the key ones.
Prose, poetry, and drama.
Yes.
And you chose poetry as your own platform of engagement.
Yes.
So how acceptable has your poems been in society?
Let me start with why I actually chose poem. Actually, I'm not just limited to writing poems. Okay. I also do prose. Proud to now have done a number of short stories, published in a number of collections in the past. But I've chosen poems or poetry as my method or means of engaging the public, because I've noticed that when you are writing stories, for instance, you are telling a story, you are narrating issues for the public. But when you use poetry, you are bringing the public or your audience to the table to understand the issue and to see what decision they should take. You are not writing a complete story for anybody when you write poetry. For me, you are putting the issue on the table, and you want people to have deeper understanding of this issue, and you want to help them to see the need for them to take the best decision that will affect them positively, and not for them to sit back and enjoy a story. For instance, if you write a poem that is maybe a satire, for instance, you may be making some comedy or making mockery of a situation or of a political figure. But that is not the real essence of it. You want people to see this issue, and you want them to see the danger of they not taking action, and you want to point it to them on the need for them to see what may happen if they sit back and they don't do anything. Like my latest work, for instance, that is entitled Akimbo in Limbo. Akimbo in Limbo, that if you stand akimbo, arms akimbo, and you do not take action on issue affecting your country, on issue affecting you as an individual, on issue affecting your country, on issue affecting us as humans across the globe, then we may be trapped. We may remain where we are. We may not be able to improve the setup in society.
What you just said reminded me of the Commodore's Trap. That's a song they sang way back. Trap. Now, you have published 2 books on poetry. Absurdity, lucidity of absurdity was published like 2017.
Yes.
Okay. In between 2017 and 2021, how much acceptance has lucidity of absurdity received? How much of acceptance and
lucidity of absurdity was published March 2017. Of course, from the record, we have noticed that a number of schools, for instance, across the nation, have started using it as part of poems that they use for teaching contemporary poetry in Nigerian University. For instance, the American University in Yola, for instance, selected a number of poems from a lucidity of absurdity to teach contemporary literature on the issue of good governance, on the issue of a democratic practice, on the issue of inequality, on issues related to history of slavery. And outside of that, I've also in recent time been informed and actually met one of the students that at least 3 students in Nigerian universities have used lucidity of absurdity as the collection of work to write their final year thesis in their university. This for me is a big success. And even a professor at then he was at Kefi State, National State University. Kefi, I think he has moved to Federal University Lafayette now. Also, you did a review of lucidity of absurdity in a journal of art and social sciences published by the university. So this for me are really key successes. Outside of this, I've met quite a number of persons that said they have been able to see 1 or 2 poems that help them to understand the social issues in our society, to understand the issue of inequality, to understand better the issue of accountability, and how to engage with state actors in a non-threatening way, in a non-violent way, in terms of dialoguing. Because the lucidity of absurdity mainly is putting it to us that there's quite a number of absurdities going on in our society.
In fact, the cover of that book, I wish you have brought a copy. We will have shown it to our viewers. Was a goat chasing a lion, and it drives home the point of the lucidity of absurdity in our society.
Exactly.
Now, that book also entered a contest and won an award, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a poem from the book actually was also selected by a body at UI or somewhere in Ibadan for an award, and was picked as the best poem for that particular award. That was way back in 2017 or 2018 now. And aside from that, there have been also some schools in Plateau State that are also using some poems from the book.
When you wrote that book, Lucidity of Absurdity, did you write it for such, or you just felt that, you know, was your spirit compelling you to just become an author, or you just did it and never knew that there would be this kind of positive fallout?
As a political scientist, my interest has always been in political philosophy. So I've actually spent quite a number of time studying issues relating to history, slave trade, and issues relating to racism, gender equality, and all of that. And for me, when I actually released Lucidity of Absurdity, I knew that it's one way in which I can actually put those issues on the front burner for people to start discussing, for people to start engaging on, and for people to have better understanding of this. There are quite a number of satire in that work. For instance, I can recall a poem there that says "Nom tom for nom tom for a bag of rice you gave us to morticians." So that's saying in essence that the way we vote, just with your thumb that has become numb, you are selling your entire life to a mortician, not even a politician. Mortician. So that, for instance, is telling people that you cannot afford to give away your life through just your thumb that you have made to become numb because you just needed a bag of rice. And even if you look at it deeper, I don't even think they do give a bag of rice for a vote these days. Maybe 2,000, sometimes t-shirts, sometimes a tin of milk or whatever. So quite the opening poem in that Lucidity of Absurdity, for instance, is also centered on succubus. For instance, some of us may be familiar with incubus. Incubus is that kind of spirit that people believe that it actually presses people down when they are sleeping and they are not able to move. But succubus, of course, is the female or woman incubus, so to say. So the essence of that work is also telling people that you cannot sit back and do nothing and allow system and allow individuals or allow persons that are very selfish, that do not have public interest, to press you down to the point that you are not able to do anything. Okay. To press down the country to the point that we are not able to address issues affecting us.
Let's come to your latest book, Kimbo in Limbo.
Yes.
The titles of your book has always been very maybe catchy and inspiring. Kimbo in Limbo. So what was the motive in choosing that title for that collection of books, for collection of poems? How many poems are there, and what issues has it generated?
Kimbo in Limbo, a number of persons have asked if it's a sequel to Lucidity of Absurdity. I said not exactly. Each of those works are actually standing on their own. Kimbo in Limbo has 66 poems, and it's centered around the issue of environment, eco-criticism, issues of
You said eco-criticism,
yes,
or ecosystems?
Eco-criticism. That's basically looking at the relationship between poetry and environment.
Okay.
Poetry and environment. And it's also looking at the need for young people to be able to see why they should not sit back and do nothing about their future. It's talking to individuals. It's talking to communities. It's talking to different categories of persons in our society and across the globe. It's not really limited to Nigeria or Africa, but it's talking to persons on the need for them to see what is important for them to do in order to improve their life as individuals, in order to improve setting in their community, in order for them to engage with system and not to sit back and say we cannot do anything. There's a poem, for instance, in the collection that is entitled Custom. And the poem is telling us that we cannot sit back and say this is the way we do things and we are not able to address issues. It's then using the issue of electricity, for instance, looking at the fact that we do not have 24-hour electricity and we have not been able to do much about this as a nation. For instance, I'm talking about Nigeria now. So it's telling us that we cannot sit back and say this is the tradition here, when the rest of the world, everybody is moving on. We have to change things that are not working for us as a people. We have to challenge traditions. We have to challenge customs that will not work for us, because nothing is really static. If you look at everything historically, even what you call your culture today, some 3-4 decades ago were not really your culture. Everything that has been accepted as the culture of a people or as what is prevalent in any communities has been put there by the power that be. The people that are able to suppress the minority or the minoritized group and put in place their own way of thinking.
Okay, so let's look at issue of accountability. How can we use poetry to demand for accountability in governance and also fight corruption?
Part of what we did when we released lucidity and absurdity, we got some support from some agencies, for instance, and we were able to turn a number of poems in that collection into community drama, into mobile drama. We went from, especially in hard-to-reach community, rural community, to use it to campaign to people on the need for them to vote rightly, on the need for them to talk to their local government chairpersons, on the need for them to challenge or discuss or dialogue with their representative elected to represent them.
This was the Makato project that you were involved in at that time. Okay.
Exactly. So we ensure that we engage with people in those communities, especially in FCT and the neighboring state in Nasarawa State. We actually went into those communities that people do not really. So
in a sense, that body of poem became a raw materials for community drama.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's now transformed from just words that you read and digest,
exactly,
and then it is now used in other forms as a community drama, raw materials to also engage the communities across.
Exactly, and aside from that, we also sometimes when there are some public event or public issues and we have opportunity to make presentation there, we also, rather than just reciting poems, we quickly turn them into a short playlet or a short satire and communicate to people. And even as a communication CS communication trainer, which I'm doing for some other agencies here in Nigeria, I've also used part of some of the poems in this to also teach issue relating to why communication is important, why you need to engage with your audience. You were saying earlier that a lot of people feel poetry is esoteric and it's difficult to relate to or understand and all that. But you don't need to use words that would not relate with the audience.
Of course, there are instances of archaic words that actually makes poetry seems esoteric. You know, we have the Elizabethan English of those ones when Shakespeare was writing. When you use those words that are no longer in vogue, people are likely going to be lost as to what meaning this particular poem is trying to pass across. But what we are saying is that how do we, you have explained the issue of using some of the poems as raw materials to do community drama, to engage the different audiences. But how has this paved way for better accountability?
Our belief is that this is also helping to shape our understanding of the polity by the populace. It's helping people to understand how government work, how system work. And quite a number of persons, for instance, once they vote, they feel that they are then powerless. They are not able to engage. They are not able to change anything. They are not able to make government to inform, participate in making government to make decision that inform decision. They are not able to put their voice or dialogue with government, ask questions about things that are affecting them. But through those drama and through the use of poetry, for instance, we have been able to, in some of those communities where we have engaged people or even also using social media also to some extent, we have been able to put it to people that you can actually call your leaders to questions. And it doesn't have to do with elected officials alone. It may also be the tradition in your community. You may have issues relating with female genital mutilation, for instance. And these are issues that from
or gender-based violence.
Exactly, and you want to start putting it to people that these things are not in our interest collectively. It doesn't benefit a segment of the society, maybe the female gender, for instance. So you want to start putting all these issues out. Like the first poem on the Kimbo in Limbo, in the Kimbo in Limbo
Behind Closed Door.
Behind Closed Door, for instance.
Which is one of my favorite anyway. Behind Closed Door is very, very penetrating, very, very incisive and insightful.
It's talking about quite a number of issues that is behind closed door, that a lot of manipulation of budget takes place. That is behind closed doors that parents discuss and take dowry for a 10-year-old wife. You can marry the relationship between wife and 10-year-old. It's behind closed doors. It's behind closed door that people take illicit drugs and they drive and cause accident and loss of life, and some other person may attribute this to maybe that's the way God wants it. That quite a number of things are happening behind closed door because we are not taking action.
It's behind closed doors our monies are stolen.
Exactly.
People read.
And it's not the collection of poems in Kimbo in Limbo, for instance, it's also not just putting out the problems. It's also, to a large extent, telling us
the solution.
That not really telling us the solution, pointing us in the way to go. That we should not just stand there lamenting.
Kimbo in Limbo.
We should not just stand there
holding our
not doing anything.
We should engage.
But we should engage. That is either we engage or, I don't want to use the word perish, but that is exactly
but
what
we will still return to this. But let's look. Today is the first anniversary of nsas protest.
Yes.
This book was just published this month. Kimbo in Limbo came to the public on October 1st. Even without you writing, Nigerian youth took their destiny in their hands and moved out en masse across cities last year, October, to demand for better policing, to demand an end to exploitation of Nigerian police officers, to demand for fair treatment of suspects, to demand for accountability in our security and defense sector. But we saw how the state apparatus reacted. And do you think you will still feel that Nigerians are not doing enough to demand for better governance, to demand for accountability? Given the nsas, you were alive, you were in this country when the nsas protest happened last year, and the way the authorities engaged that process. What's your take on that? Even as today is the first anniversary of nsas.
The issue of nsas is a very big issue. It's an issue that...
and I'm surprised you didn't have any of your poems targeting nsas.
There are quite a number of poems that are also related to the issue of participation and engagement, and demanding that there must be change in the way things are designed. For instance, as I mentioned earlier, there are quite a number of poems in that collection that are related to the issue of history, tracking history even from pre-medieval era to date. And if you look across the world, you will have seen that human rights activists, be they young persons, be they gender activists, be they environmental activists, have always used protests, especially non-violent protests, as a tool for engaging, as a tool for demanding for change, demanding for accountability, or demanding for government to act in such a way that is more beneficial to the collective, to everyone. So for instance, there's a particular poem in Kimbo and Limbo that is entitled "Of Lord, Word and Sword." Of Lord, Word and Sword. This particular poem is tracking from the era of hunter-gatherer, how human has continued to fight or to struggle in their effort to improve their society. So nsas cannot be a one-off issue, is what I'm saying. Of course, proud to nsas, you have seen in those days when we were in the universities, SAP protests, quite a number of protests have been happening in Nigeria. So what we're saying in essence is
SAP protest,
even
June 12 protest, and Tubok, and I mean, bring back our girls,
quite a number.
You know.
So you cannot, nsas is a very good initiative, and it cannot be a one-off issue. What I'm saying in essence is, if you dialogue with government and they are not willing to discuss with you on the table, you may also want to protest on the street, which is something that is a human right for everyone, which is fundamental, which, as far as you don't bring the element of violence into it. Quite a number of persons in the past have always said hoodlums hoodlums break in and take over some of these protests and all this. But that is not the issue. It's the function of the state to ensure that people are able to protest peacefully, and they are able to discuss with the state, and then they are supposed to provide security for both the protesters and the rest of the people that are not even part of that protest.
So, okay, let's look at how can poetry contribute to the fight against corruption. We have talked broadly about accountability, but in terms of anti-corruption, can we also use poetry to fight corruption in society?
Yes, to a large extent we can do that. If you start using poetry, for instance, in our secondary schools or even other tertiary institutions, for instance, across the country, we can start using poetry to teach the issue of anti-corruption, for instance. Introduce poems that are centered around the issue of corruption to students early, and let them use it to dialogue, to discuss, to interact, to have sessions in their classrooms, and to see what shall we do to address corruption in our country. As I mentioned, when you are writing, you are doing drama, sometimes you want to entertain people, but poetry, to a large extent, especially political poems, are not really meant for entertainment. They are meant to let people see what the situation is and what they should do. So it's actually involving the people.
It's a call to action.
The process.
You are saying that
yes,
poetry could be a call to action, yes, to demand for accountability, to demand for fight to promote fight against corruption in an intellectual sense.
Exactly.
I've also heard this said that some of our musicians are poets, that they bring poetry into their music. People like Fela Anikulapo Kuti, for instance, who sings protest songs. Even many of the reggae songs are believed to be like poetry. Do you subscribe to that school of thought?
When you look at art generally, of which poetry is just one aspect, it's everything. It of course involves creative writing, music, drawing, molding, or sculpturing, and etc.
The creative industry generally
majorly is to communicate, is to pass a message. So in fact, in the early days, poetry were mainly not like written poems, but they are through oral method. They are through oral method. You see, like even those people in the King Palace that praise the king early in the morning, they use poetry, for instance, to do that.
The chanters.
Exactly. You find people like Olarewaju Adepoju that used to do Ewi.
Yes,
in those early days.
So
people like Fela, and even quite a number of recent musicians, you see some rhyming,
even some beautiful Nubia.
Exactly. What they are saying, they may actually be using repetition, for instance, to focus on a particular phrase. They want people to imbibe this, to have better understanding of this, and to take this home and to think of this day after, not just maybe dancing to the music. Of course, you can use music to entertain, but you can also use it to communicate. So poetry, art generally, to a large extent, is
we have our first caller. Let me pause you there. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. This is Independent Television. Who do you want to speak with? Yes, you are calling the wrong number, please. So you can join our discussion. We are discussing poetry, accountability, and national development. The number to call is on your screen, 009-987-1989. It's there on your screen. If you want to join our poet laureate, Olumide Olaniyan, who is a poet laureate, he has published 2 poetry books. The first is Lucidity of Absurdity, and more recently, Kimbo in Limbo, and he's been taking us through the voyage of what we can use poetry for, different forms and shapes of how we can best use poetry. So the number to call once again is 0809-987-1989. It's on your screen. So Olumide, let's look at, you are a member of Abuja Writers Forum. What do you do at that forum, and how is that linked to the larger creative writing community?
Thanks so much for that. Abuja Writer Forum, it's a group of writers coming together to...
Sorry, we have another caller. Hello?
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
I love your program this morning.
Yes, tell us your name and where you're calling from, sir.
My name is Timothy Onyemechi, calling from Chika Airport Road.
Okay. Timothy, you are welcome. What's your question or comment?
My own...
Timothy, please do call back. We lost that call. I think network is not friendly this morning. So you were saying something about Abuja Writers Forum.
Yeah. So we come together to mainly see how as writers.
Hello? Sorry, let me pause you there. Hello? Oh, there.
We can peer review one another's work and see how we can improve our work. In fact, it's Actually, after I joined the Abuja Writers Forum, that I was quite a number of poems that I wrote were peer reviewed. There were comments. We discussed this every Sunday evening at what we call critique sessions, and where we look at poems written by our members and make comments and make suggestions on how they can improve on it. It's quite after this that I've been able to come out with 2 of my books. So I think for me it's a very good opportunity. And in recent time, especially after the this COVID era, so to say, in recent time we started doing a lot of things virtually. Every end of the month we bring panelists to discuss quite a number of creative issues around creative writing, poetry, criticism of creative work, short stories, and etc. We bring in quite a number of international writers to be part of this, and that should be taking place this Sunday. I think maybe by 4 or 5 in the evening this Sunday.
So now poetry has been taken to another level. You are now telling us poetry is not just for entertainment.
No.
It's also to point us on how we can better our society. It's a call to action. Now, let's also look at this. There is an NLNG award, Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Award for Literature.
Yes.
And it is rotated among the 3 major pillars of the arts.
And criticism
the drama, drama, prose, and poetry in turn. What do you think of that NLNG award? Is it there have been a number of criticisms which has attended to it, that maybe some of the winners were not justifiable, but we know it's not peculiar to Nigeria. We just have the Nobel Prize for Literature won by a Tanzanian based in UK, Ghana, and some people will still feel that no, that person should not have been selected. What's your take about the award system in Nigeria, particularly in the creative arts sector, and looking at NLNG award?
NLNG giving award relating to creative writing is something that is very good, because it helps to promote issues around creative writing, which is of course something that's very important. But for me, as a writer, my focus has not been on targeting award. My interest is mainly to write and to see how people use my work to improve whatever areas that it relates to what they're doing. Of course, this is not to say that giving award to writer is something that would not also help writers to become more popular, for them to be more known, and for people to also discuss their work more. And in every issues that humans are involved with, you cannot rule out people critiquing the methodology used. And that's the essence. What is so important or good about that is the fact that it also helps the organizers to also improve on whatever they're doing. Of course, the LNG award, there have been quite a number of winners in the past, both in the prose and the poetry, and even in the area of drama, and also there is also an aspect of it that also look at literary criticism also, and there is no one that you eventually select as winner that some persons will say this is good, some persons will say this is
so it's normal right. that there will be
what is so important is that it should be open how you arrive at the winner. This is something that Nobel laureate, for instance, is not doing, because they do not really explain how they come about, who they are picking as,
why they pick somebody as a winner.
But for LLNG, they should engage the public, and they should speak more on why.
But I think there is a panel of experts that usually examine the submissions,
yes,
and do the long listing,
yes,
and then the short listing, and then they tell you why a particular candidate or a particular nominee has been elected, been selected as the winner, yes, like the issue of the publication, the quality of the production, the articulation, elocution, and all of those things. They are usually there. It's not as if we don't know, but irrespective, a lot of people still feel dissatisfied about the selection criteria. I'm not sure that we don't know those selection criteria. They are very well known. I know some, but I think it's just normal for people to feel disenchanted that, oh, okay.
And that's why writers should not be writing in order to win awards.
Okay.
You should write it because you want to document your experience. You want to bring about a change on things that you do not agree with, or you want to help your community, or you want to help people around you to have better understanding of issues and as well as their importance. So for me, writing should not be driven by interest to win award or some other things related to it, but your writing should be focused on what you want to change. And just before we may be wrapping up, it's also to mention that poetry is not just limited to maybe activism and etc. Sometimes people also write love poems. Yeah, for instance, sure. People also write poems about some people may be writing some descriptive poems, or some poems that are just telling you about the beauty of a flower, of a plant, of a society.
Our time is gone, Olumide, but your last word on the place of creative writing in Nigeria as a whole. Looking at it, compare that. You brought the issue of writing of love poems. If you want to woo a lady abroad, you can do her a poem, buy her a rose flower, and she will be thrilled and say, oh, beautiful. But in Nigeria, if you write a love poem for somebody, they may not even understand it.
It also depends on who you are writing for.
That's why I'm talking about acceptability and the culture. The culture in Nigeria compared to abroad, in terms of creative writing, what is your summary in 30 seconds?
It depends on, there's no uniformity. You cannot bust Nigeria into a particular culture and bust. It depends on different type of writers. In Nigeria, you have writers that will write on esoteric poems, or some other writers that will write some poems that are free verses that you may be able to engage with ease. And you also, of course, also have this kind of people in other countries. But in essence, is what we can say in conclusion is poetry is a poet or a writer engaging their society in the best way they can.
Okay, there you are. You've heard it all from the poet laureate, Olumide Olaniyan, the author of Lucidity of Absurdity, and recently Kimbo in Limbo. Please do go get your copy in any of the notable bookshops in Abuja and across the country. I hope people can still access those books. And would they be online, soft copy on Amazon?
You have Lucidity of Absurdity on Amazon, and Kimbo in Limbo should be there by 1st of November.
By 1st of November, you can buy Kimbo in Limbo on the Amazon. That's the soft copy. Thank you very much, Olumide, for coming to grace this occasion. Please do enjoy the rest of your day. Like I do say, this program is open up for sponsorship and advert placement. If you find what we are doing worthy, please join us and come and partner with us to make it better.